Hey everyone, welcome back to CJ Off-Road. Today we have the ARB Zenith front bumper, and we're going to take a closer look at it and show you how to install it on the 21 and up Ford Bronco. If you're looking for a front bumper for your 21 and up Ford Bronco, then the ARB Zenith front bumper is the one for you. This bumper is made to be very tough and it looks great. The main part of the bumper is made out of a 3 to 5 gauge steel, so when you're taking this off-roading, this should be able to handle all of the abuse. Now, the other good thing about this bumper is that all of the recovery points are actually tied into the frame rail to be able to give you maximum durability and strength when trying to pull you out of a sticky situation. This product comes in a powder-coated black, which there's no complaints there at all because it actually matches the factory fender flares pretty well. Now, besides this bumper being as durable as a tank, I do want to point out that it does have some other great features to it. With the way it's designed, it'll be able to give you a lot more clearance if you've upgraded your wheel and tires, and it'll give a lot more ground clearance as well too if you do plan on taking your Bronco off-road. Now, our Bronco is a base model, but if you do have a higher trim level, don't worry, this bumper will still work out for you. It'll come with all of the hardware and brackets to be able to mount up your parking sensor and your adaptive cruise control. And even if you have a Bronco with fog lights, it actually comes with the hardware and a bracket to be able to mount the factory fog lights to this bumper. But if you do want to use fog lights that are aftermarket, they do include other brackets and hardware to be able to mount those up as well. And speaking of lights, one of the biggest selling points on this bumper besides the looks and durability was the integrated light bar. This is the only bumper on the market that actually provides a light bar with the sail of the bumper, and it comes with all of the wiring to be able to get it all hooked up inside the Bronco. Now, if you're interested in purchasing one of these ARB Zenith bumpers, you can check out the link down in the description below. One thing I do want to mention is there are two different options when purchasing this bumper. You can either purchase the bumper for a narrow fender flare option or a wide fender flare option. We have the Sasquatch extra large fender flares on our Bronco, so of course we went with the wider flare option. Now let's go ahead, get this installed on our Bronco because I can't wait to see it on there. For the first part of this install, we have to remove the factory bumper, so let's go ahead and get that done. We're going to start off by taking these covers off here. If you just put your fingers right in the opening, they'll pull right on off. Now I'm going to go ahead and remove the 15mm bolts that actually hold the bumper on, but I do want to mention if you do have parking sensors, when you're taking the covers off at that point, that's when you're going to disconnect the parking sensors. With our bumper removed, we can go ahead and actually remove the 4 15mm bolts that hold our skid plate on. So this is the area where the factory bumper will actually bolt up on the Bronco. Now behind this piece of metal, there's a plate for the actual threads of the bolts that you use to mount the bumper. What we're going to do is we're going to remove that for the new bumper. So when removing it, there is 2 plastic fasteners. It's kind of hard to see on camera, but on the opposite side of this metal, you'll have one here in this corner, and then you'll also have one right over here. Now these are hand tight, so just go ahead, loosen them, pop them off, and then slide the bracket out. From here, we're going to remove the tow hooks, which are also held in by 15mm bolts. Now keep in mind, when you do go to remove both of the tow hooks, they do support the intercooler a little bit, so the intercooler will hang down, but don't worry, it won't damage anything. At this point, if your Bronco is equipped with adaptive cruise control, then you'll want to follow along for these next couple of steps. The adaptive cruise control module will sit behind this plastic box, so you actually remove the entire shutter here for the intercooler. After that, disconnect the wiring harness and then grab the plug that goes to the module. Once you locate the plug that goes to the module, you're actually going to want to separate this from the rest of the wiring loom. That way it has enough room to be able to reach over to the new bumper. Now we're at the point where we're going to mount our brackets onto the Bronco to be able to mount the new bumper to the Bronco. First, we have to go ahead and loosen up these 15mm bolts that hold a plate on that'll get in the way of our bracket. With the bolt finally removed, go over to your bag of hardware and grab the 6mm black spacer and then install that onto the bolt, and then put this bolt back into the plate that you just took out. Moving on to our next step here, we're actually going to go ahead and install these brackets now. Now you can mess this up, so it's very important to get this step right because they didn't label each bracket from passenger to driver side. So how to know that you have the correct top bracket here, if you look here, there is an indent, and you'll want this indent to be facing towards the middle of the Bronco. So if you hold it up in place, you'll see that the indent here is going towards the middle, and then that's how you know you have the correct bracket. Now from here, we're going to slide this bracket over the loosely installed 15mm bolt that we just took out and put our spacer on. You're going to want the OEM spacer to be on top of the bracket, and then the ARB supplied spacer to be on the bottom side of the bracket. With our top mount on the Bronco and secured, it's time to go ahead and grab our side mounts. Now with the side mounts, it's the same thing as the top mount. It's very easy to get each side mixed up. One way to be able to tell if you have the correct side or not, the plastic pin that's actually on the back side of this metal here that held up the factory bumper plate will go right into this hole on the mount here. So just make sure that everything lines up. As long as that plastic piece goes in, then you have the correct side. Now that both brackets on, we're just about ready to throw some hardware in it. Before I throw any hardware in, I do want to mention that this side for the bracket is way easier to go on compared to the other side. Now when fitting in the other side, I noticed that if you actually leave the 15mm bolt in that top plate loose, it's easier to be able to work in that side bracket. I know I originally told you to tighten it up, but go ahead, loosen that, and then after you get the bracket in, tighten that bolt down, and you'll be good to go. As far as installing the hardware now for these brackets, you're going to want to grab the long M10 bolt, a crush tube, and then 2 washers, and then also those 2 black 6mm spacers. Once you have all of those, we can go ahead and install these brackets finally. All right, so at this point, you'll grab your bolt, your washer, and then your 6mm black washer, and then you're gonna wanna put your black washer in between the frame rail and the bracket, and then the bolt through the hole. And don't forget to add the crush tube to the middle of the frame rail. Once you have the bolt through, then you're gonna grab your second 6mm black washer, and you're gonna put it in between the frame rail and the bracket, just like you did in the beginning of this. And then another washer, and your nut. Now at this point, we can go ahead and tighten everything down. Now that we have this side secured and tightened down, it's time to repeat the same process on the opposite side. At this point, we're going to assemble the bumper so it's ready to be installed on our Bronco. Now, if you have fog lights or parking sensors, this is the point where you're actually going to want to install those. But since we don't have those on our Bronco, we're going to go ahead and install our recovery points. Now, to install the recovery points, you are going to have to put in these wing nuts. And when installing these wing nuts, you are going to want to install them from the back side, and they just simply pop into place. So you'll have 2 holes right here, and then you'll also have 2 on the side over here. And then you'll also have 4 on this side. After installing the cage nuts, you're going to go ahead and grab this bracket from the hardware kit and some M6 hardware and install it to the bottom of the bumper. After both are in place, go ahead and tighten them down. Alright, so now we're going to assemble our recovery points. You're going to want to grab 3 M12 bolts, 2 washers for each one, and a nut for each one. After we assemble these, we'll then put them on the bumper, and then the bumper can finally go on our Bronco. We are now at the point where we can finally mount this bumper up to our Bronco, and the way we're going to do that is we're going to grab our recovery points, slide them into this area here, and then grab an M10 bolt, 2 washers, and a nut, 1 for each side. And then what we'll do is put the bumper up, throw a bolt and a washer and a nut through, and then we'll be good to go, and then we'll start putting in the rest of the bolts. Well, the bumper is now on. Not fully yet, we still got to put in the rest of the hardware, but at this point the bumper is looking really good. There's still a lot left to do, so let's keep cranking out the work. On to our next part here, we're going to reinstall our tow hooks. Now keep in mind the intercooler is sagging down a little bit, so you're going to have to push this up when you're reinstalling them. We're starting to get down to our final steps here. It's now time to go ahead and put the front cover plate on, and then after that we'll get our skid plate back on there. So we're ready to put the factory skid plate back in, and at this point, if you do have a plastic skid plate, we actually do have to trim a little bit for it to fit correctly. So the area you have to trim is going to be this opening here. You're going to want to cut out basically this entire middle section on either side, and then it'll be able to fit up there nice and snug. Moving on to the last piece of the bumper here, we're going to go ahead and install this. You're going to need 5 cage nuts because this is actually going to go behind the bumper and behind the front panel here. And then we'll grab some hardware and get everything installed. After you get one of these plates down and secured, go ahead and repeat the same process on the opposite side. Alright, so we are finished up with the ARB Zenith front bumper, at least as far as the install goes. We're at the point now where we just have to wire in our light bar and get that working. But one thing I do want to point out here, like I said in the beginning of our video, we have a base model Bronco, so it doesn't come with any parking sensors. In the ARB kit, they do have these plastic plugs that'll actually fill in the holes on the bumper if you don't have any parking sensors like us. So it's pretty simple, just put the plug up here and pop it into place. We are now on our final step, which is wiring in the light bar. And if you have a Bronco with auxiliary switches from the factory, this is going to be a lot easier for you. Essentially, you're going to take your harness and you're actually going to cut it before the first relay, and then wire in a ground, and then wire in the power wire to your auxiliary switch. Now, if you're like us and you have a Bronco that didn't come with the auxiliary panel, then we are going to have a little bit more wiring to do. So let's go ahead, jump into it, and get everything wired up. So to start off wiring in the light bar, we're gonna have to go ahead and disconnect one of the terminals on the battery, so that way we don't end up shocking ourselves later on. Now, one thing I do wanna mention, if you check out the ARB wiring diagram, they say to tap into one of the high beam headlight wires, and we aren't gonna be able to do that on our Bronco because we still drive this on the road. If you tap into the headlight high beam wire, when you turn on your high beams, that means the light bar is going to turn on, and this light bar is for off-road use only, so we're going to wire it up a little bit different, which you'll see in just a moment. Alright, so go ahead and grab your wiring harness, and at this point we're actually just going to fish it in between the headlight and the frame rail here, which will meet us at the bottom of the back side of the bumper. Now that we have the wiring harness routed and hanging out from the bottom, we can actually go ahead and connect it to the light bar plug. All right, now we're gonna start wiring everything together. So I do have two grounds. One of the grounds I'm actually gonna go ahead and utilize one of the factory grounds. So let's go ahead, take that bolt out and get this bolted up. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna bunch up of all these wires here, and I'm actually going to run the wires under the ground cable. That way we just have a nice clean finish then. And then we'll be able to run it along the frame rail here. All right, now we'll install our first power wire here, right onto the battery terminal. Now we're going to install our second ground for the remote, and we're going to use another factory grounding point. With the wires installed into our engine bay, it's now time to disconnect the remote from the harness, feed this into the cabin of the Bronco, and then get everything wired up from in there. So we're now going to tap in our second power wire here. Now this power wire comes directly from the remote, which is inside the cabin. I went ahead and took this yellow wire, ran it right through the same grommet hole that we ran inside of the cabin, and now we're going to connect it to the battery, and then we should be all good to go. Now that everything is wired up and connected, it's time to go back and just clean up all the wires inside the engine bay and inside the cab of the Bronco. Well, as you can see, the ARB Zenith front bumper is all installed on our Bronco, and I'm super happy with the outcome. The bumper looks great, and it's definitely super durable. Now give yourself a couple hours to be able to perform this install, because it is a very involved install and there's a lot of pieces to be able to connect to be able to make the bumper work. Now I definitely recommend calling a friend if you have one available to be able to help you out with this install. All of the components and the bumper itself are very heavy, so it'll definitely help to be able to get everything aligned correctly. Now it's time to drop a gear and disappear. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and as always, check out the link in the description for all your off-road part needs.